stand. All right. Yeah, I really want to I just want to run and I just want to just do that. I feel like it would be really musical if I did that, but why? I'm hoping I'll get invited back one day. So, Wiley and I were talking earlier, and I didn't write a speech, and I did that purposefully because I felt like if I wrote a speech or if I had notes to work from, that it would kind of feel stilted, and I would try to stick to what I was going to say. So I'm going to talk. Plus, it would have been what was on my mind 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I want to talk about what's on my mind today. But I have given a lot of thought to what I would say to you guys. I was talking to a friend of mine. He's another writer. We'll call him Cormac. So Cormac has actually been on the stage before. He was a guest here, and so I asked him. I said, "What do you think I should talk about?" And Cormac said, "Just give them a nut show. That's all they want. They want a nut show." I said, "What?" He said, "Just give them a nut show. That's all they care about." Cormac's a little bitter. He's been doing this a few years. And I refute that. I'm not going to give you a nut show. I'm going to give you something genuine. Because when I write, I try to be genuine. I try to reveal of myself when I write. I think publication day, I think when someone's book comes out, I think on that day they ought to want to hide away and not be seen, because I think they should have revealed themselves in such a way, in such an embarrassing way, that they wouldn't want other people to see them. So that's kind of, if I have a theory of writing, that would be it, that the author reveals himself in such a way that when that book comes out, he's almost embarrassed to kind of talk about it. About 20 years ago, I got a job at this company. They're called New Skin, and it was a low-paying job, and I was happy to get it. And on the first day that I got there, they had hired a whole group of people. It was like 50 people came in that day, and there was one group of people. There's about 10 of them that they were kind of separate from the rest of us. A little bit different. They came from an organization. I think they're called Job Corps. Have you guys heard of Job Corps? And I think they even had either necklaces or a special shirt or something. But they were set apart from the rest of us. And there was one man. His name was Terrence, and he had just kind of a really lively personality, and I was kind of drawn to him. Because he was charismatic, but also because he was a little bit out of step and he was an outsider. I mean, he was already marked as different by being part of Job Corps, so I knew there was something going on in his past that was a little bit different than what was in my past. So I kind of befriended him, and we talked a little bit, but I kept my distance. It's hard for me to make friends sometimes, but we did have a little bit of a connection. And then he had blonde hair, and it was really long, but his hair was more receded than mine is. He had that sort of Steven Seagal thing, but it was blonde hair and a ponytail, at least down to his back. So I came in the next day, and I'm kind of looking for him a little bit, and people are milling around, and there's a man sitting at a table, and he has this curtain of hair covering his face. And it was Terrence. I didn't even recognize him because he looked completely different. And the reason he wanted his face covered is because there were bruises. He had a broken nose and a black eye and scrapes. And I talked to him. I mean, no one wanted anything to do. He looked horrible, right? And no one wanted anything to do with him. And that drew me to him even more, right? Because again, I like the outsider. I feel like an outsider myself. And he said that he had gone to a movie the night before, and there were some men bothering a young woman in the parking lot, and he interceded, and so the men beat the crap out of him. And I thought, wow, that's heroic, I guess. So everyone was kind of avoiding him from that point because of the way he looked. And I took him out to lunch with me that day and kind of got to know him a little bit more, and we became close friends. And he would tell me about the things that are important to him in his life. And one of the things that was important to him was Alice Cooper. Now, I'm going to admit to you, I don't know. I like rock, and I know a lot about different, but I know nothing about Alice Cooper. Somehow that just completely escaped me. So as we got to know each other over the months, and we became close, he would always talk about Alice Cooper, and he would just go on and on about the concept albums and the makeup. And there was this one song called Cold Ethel. And he would talk about Cold Ethel all the time. He would interpret it for me, right? He would say that Cold Ethel was about a woman named Ethel who was dead, and the guy kept her in his refrigerator for unwholesome reasons. Not that you would keep anybody in a refrigerator for wholesome reasons, but but apparently there are levels to this song, right? Because Ethel was spelled E-T-H-Y-L, ethyl alcohol. So it was actually an ode to getting drunk and drinking alcohol. So, Alice Cooper apparently is, quite the poet with these hidden levels of meaning. But this meant a lot to Terrence. And a day came when Alice Cooper was in town, and Terrence entered some kind of contest, so he was invited to meet the man backstage, and he was telling me about this experience of meeting Alice Cooper. And he talked about how he waited in line and just waited, biding his time. I'm sure he's sweating and he's nervous, and it finally got to be, and he rushed up to Alice Cooper, shook his hand. I'm sure he's just rubbing all over him, and he said, "Hey man, I just want you to know you saved my life. You saved my life." And he proceeded to tell him about his teenage years and how his songs meant so much to him, and he was able to cope with the turmoil of his teenage years and of being an outsider and of feeling different. So you're probably saying, well, why are you telling me about Alice Cooper? This is Southern Voices, right? And the reason I'm telling you about that is because I wanted to tell you, why do I write? And I've had to think a lot lately about why I write. I've published 3 novels, and I have a 4th novel, and it's called Abnormal Man. And I turned it into my publisher, and they rejected it. So that was pretty disturbing for me. And I was on a pretty good roll. The editor said that she thought it was brilliant, which I was grateful for that, but it was too dark, and there was no one to root for, and it's pretty distasteful. All of which is true. My first book, A Very Simple Crime, it took me 10 years to get it published, and what I heard over and over and over is it's too dark and there's no one to root for. So the irony is, this woman, my editor, Natalie Rosenstein, who I love, she broke the mold, and she stepped forward and said, "I'll publish this," even though everyone else has said it's too dark and there's no one to root for. But she published it. It did well. It got good notices and stuff. And so the irony is now my 4th book, she's saying, "Oh no, this is too dark and there's no one to root for. We're not going to." Here's what she actually said. The thing that still reverberates in my mind is, "Your fans will never forgive you if you publish this." And both of them. So that hurt, and that's kind of why I preface with saying, I'm going to be genuine, and I want to be genuine with my writing. So I wrote that book. I was trying to be genuine. I was trying to reveal of myself. And so I have this opportunity or this option of, I can take Abnormal Man and I can stick it in a drawer, and they would like me to write maybe a sequel to my first book, or as they said, anything else other than Abnormal Man. But I'm not going to do it. And the reason I'm not going to do it is because of Alice Cooper. The reason I'm not going to do it is because I think that somewhere out there's at least one person, one guy who's out of step, who's a little confused, who's an outsider, who doesn't fit in, who might read that book and it might save his life. And that is my goal as a writer. I want to save somebody's life. So I'm going to stick to my guns, and I'm going to get Abnormal Man published one way or another. And I have more faith in readers than I think publishers often do. They seem to be thinking more like film studios these days than publishers used to think. They want, big ideas, and a film studio has to invest millions of dollars, tens of millions, and sometimes $100 million into a project. So they want to meet certain demographics, and they want the heroes to be heroic, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we as readers want more from our books than what movies oftentimes give us. I think we're smarter and more open-minded than that. So I'm going to stick to my guns, and I hope that maybe you guys will be hearing about Abnormal Man. I'll tell you what it's about really quick. It's called Abnormal Man. It's an abnormal book. It's about a teenage pyromaniac. He receives sexual gratification by playing with fire, who has a horrible home life. He gets involved with a one-legged, hyper-violent convict who was raised by a pedophile. And the three of them do not make a good combination. And there's nothing more easy than to write something disturbing. That's the easiest thing that you can do. There's no challenge to that. So I don't want you to. I'm not saying I've written something disturbing and they don't want to read it, because that's not a challenge. But the book does have an emotional heart, and it does talk about our humanity, I feel, and hopefully it is thrilling and exciting and has a good story. Those are all important as well. So I think with books we want all of that at the same time. So I think that's all I had to say. Wait a minute. I'm gonna. Thank you, guys. I guess I'm still on. I want to add one little thing, just about how grateful I am to be here today, and what a huge honor this. I've published 3 books, and this is the single best thing that's happened to me as a writer and all that time. This is a huge honor for me to be. Because Wiley's book was brilliant. I thought it was one of the best books I read last year, and with Ron Rash and all the writers that are here today, and also the history, and probably my single favorite writer may be Larry Brown, and so the big piece of this that is so important, that means so much to me, is I'm doing something that Larry Brown did during his writing career. So it really it means so very much to me. And also, by the way, if you like Larry Brown and you've read his writing and you want to know more about him, this lady named Jean Cash has written a biography of Larry Brown, which is fantastic. It's literate and insightful, and I highly recommend it if you want to know more about Larry Brown and his personal life. And it's interesting. I talked about how a writer's book should be revealing of himself, and certainly I get that from I'm not comparing myself to Larry Brown, because there's really no comparison, but I do get that piece from him, the honesty in fiction. I'm a very plain kind of writer, and as much as I love Larry Brown, he's not going to be remembered for the way he constructed his sentences. He's going to be remembered, for the truth in his fiction and the way he was able to reveal of himself and give of himself in his fiction. So I just did want to mention what an honor this is for me today.
Okay, questions?
I want to know what happened to Terrence.
Well, I'll talk a little bit more about Terrence. Another thing that he did, he showed up to work one day, he showed up about an hour late. He showed up during break time, and this is back when everybody still smoked. So everyone was out at the front of the building smoking cigarettes, and myself among them. And he shows up in a taxi cab, right? And this was a minimum wage job. We couldn't afford taxi rides. So he shows up, 2.5 hours late to work in a taxi. And he gets out, and we're like, well, what happened? He said, well, there were some kids in his neighborhood that gave LSD to a cat. And the cat put its paws into a fan and mangled them. And so Terrence, the hero, he bundled up the cat and rushed it to a veterinarian, and that's why that's a horrible story. I mean, I hate to say it, but as I look back on that time, I'm more certain it was just a story, because I don't think LSD would affect a cat's nervous system the same way it would a human being. And I think, most fans have grills in front of them that would prevent possible. But anyway, that's just, but what ultimately became of him, I don't know. If you see this, Terrence, we're being filmed. If you see this, Terrence, I'm thinking of you, buddy, and I hope you're okay. So.
Right there.
What you said about your book that's not yet published
Yes.
made me think a whole lot of the book Requiem for a Dream.
Really?
Yeah.
Raise your hand. Okay. Okay, keep going. I'm intrigued.
Because there was nobody to pull for. There was no good person here. All outsiders. No happy ending. It was very real, and it really moved me a lot because of the reality.
Well, you've made my day with that comment. I never thought about Hubert Selby is one of my favorites, and Last Exit to Brooklyn.
It's not a fun book to read.
Well,
It's not a fun movie to watch, but it's really very strong.
no, and everything doesn't have to be fun, but yeah, it's one of my favorites, along with Last Exit to Brooklyn. But yeah, I would like to think, that I've captured that same kind of power, and it's people at the extreme. Definitely, Selby was attracted to outsiders as well, and people in extremis and struggling to get through life. Well, if you have any contacts in the publishing industry, just see me after the show. Thank you for that comment. That's I haven't thought about him, but thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
Next question. Right there.
I wanted to ask you how long it took to write your first novel, because it's phenomenal. It's so well crafted and so well done, and I was just blown away by it being the first novel, and I'm just curious how long from start to finish did it take?
Well, that's the first novel I've penned under my real name. My pen name is Nicholas Sparks. It's kind of a left brain, right brain approach to writing. No, I'm teasing. It's actually Janet Ivanovich, but it took me about 6 years. I started as a short story in the spring of 2004, and it sold to my editor in December 2010. So off and on about 6 years.
Wow.
And it was the first novel I'd ever tried to write. That's probably why it took so long, to be honest. Because people have asked me, what's the hardest thing about publishing a book? And the answer is writing one. Getting it published was much easier than writing it. It was much less intense. It was much less hopeless.
There might be a few people that would disagree with that.
Yeah.
But you wrote a great book, and that's why that was your experience.
But there was a lot of disappointment. Like I had an agent that I got relatively quickly, and she tried to sell it for like 1.5 years. And she was basically telling me, like, we need to break up because nobody's ever going to buy this book.
Wow.
So after working on this book for 2 years, And then trying to publish it for a year and a half, I just thought, man, nobody is ever going to buy this book. And so it's a lot of stopping and going, a lot of stopping and starting. And you just kind of have to look at rejection as an invitation to try something different, to improve or to give it another shot, or what can you learn from no,
I want to ask you a question. Did you ever consider having a single point of view for that book?
No, because I just thought that none of the narrators know the whole story.
Right.
And so I could only bring the roundness of the story by having those three narrators. And I think for a tragedy like that, I don't know if I could have made one of those narrators strong enough to communicate the import of its effect on the community. Other writers probably could, but I couldn't do that.
No, I think you made the right, if it was indeed a choice, you made the right choice. It
Yeah.
certainly, it works perfectly, but I was just, and since you wrote it for so long, I wondered if you ever tried to do it from a single point of view or with.
I had other narrators that just wouldn't behave and say the right things. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, that's what you need me to say? Make me. I'm like, I'll do better than that. I'll just delete you. Who's God now? Like,
Got another question right
then I'll be
here.
like, undo.
Got a question right here.
When you have either one of you, when you have a novel rejected, like, so many people encounter, what do you do? I mean, do you go back always? How do you approach rewriting?
What I do is as I come here and I tell as many people as possible that I'm literally, and I want to be honest about this. I want to build buzz about it. I want to get it out there. I want to see it published. But the more realistic, answer to your question is don't give up. And you'll probably, that's the kind of advice you hear a lot, but it's definitely not going to get published if you give up. If you get criticism or feedback that rings true to you, or you're hearing certain themes in the rejection letters, then you need to look at revising it. But don't start rewriting just because one editor said one thing. But you just keep it out there as much as you can. What do you think, Wiley?
I think rejection is different. Like, I think the rejection he's gotten about the market's not ready for this book, that's not a legitimate reason not to publish a book. So I think if it's a good book and you believe in it, even the person who's rejecting you believes in it, you got to go. You got to go for it. You got to keep going. I don't think market reasons are a reason to give up on something.
Definitely.
But I think it's different. If somebody just says no to your book, you just keep going. But what can be sometimes more challenging is somebody who's already said yes to your book and then gives you, a 10-page letter of revisions. That's almost tougher to deal with than a no. Because when you get a no, you just say, oh, it's not right for them. But when somebody's already working with you and you get these revisions, you really kind of have to go back and reimagine something that you thought was done. It's like renaming a child, or suddenly your son or daughter waking up and having blonde hair, and you're thinking, I thought you had brown hair yesterday, and they're like, well, editor wanted it to be different, So there's a lot of emotional stuff or intellectual stuff that gets wrapped up in that process. But no needs to be the least affecting thing you hear, to be honest.
Yeah. And I want to add a little bit more. I don't know if you're a writer or if you're just curious about it, but with my first novel, it took more than 10 years to get a yes. At one point I had an agent, and it's actually been optioned for film. It's optioned for film before it was published. So I had even that going for me. The cover letter, I could say it's optioned for film, and this famous person wants to direct it, and this famous person wrote the screenplay, blah blah. And it's still, I kept getting the no's. And at one point, like 5 years into the process, one editor revisions. I added 30,000 words to the book based on this editor's notes, and looking back, I think it just diluted whatever power the book had. I think it just diluted it and brought it down. But and we virtually got a no from probably 80% of every publisher in New York, and so we withdrew it from the market to see if anything would happen with the movie. But enough time went by that there was so much turnover in the publishing houses that got a new agent, we're able to resubmit. And my new agent, he actually found a publisher on his third submission. So you just never know. So if your dream is to be published by a mainstream publisher, don't give up. And that kind of brings up the specter of self-publishing, and that's a different discussion. But I just wanted to add that in case you're struggling with getting something published. Keep trying.
Right there.
Could you launch into that discussion of self-publishing?
You know what? Yeah, I rehearsed an answer for that in my mind this morning in case somebody asked it. This is a good answer. because so many people are self-publishing, because it's lethally easy to do that now with electronic publishing. There's literally, we have the gatekeepers. Forget the gate. There's nothing. You don't even have to walk across the street now. You just push a button and you're published, and it's available to every person across the globe. So what's wrong with that? What could possibly be wrong with that? And I thought, well, self-publishing is like self-stimulation. It feels pretty good, yeah, but it's not the same thing as sex. So if what you want is to be published, find yourself a publisher. I told you that was pretty good.
Yeah. I think self-publishing can do a lot of different things. Like there are writers who are a million times more successful than I'll ever be, who have the fan base after however many novels, who are just going to do like Barry Eisler is just going to do self-published stuff from now on, and he'll make millions of dollars off every book because everybody in America knows who he is. But if I'd self-published, none of you would have read my book, and I wouldn't be here. Right. That's just plain and simple how it is. I have the machine of my publisher behind me, and but on the other hand, if the goal of self-publishing is for posterity, if you're publishing a family story or a memoir or something that you're doing just for the circle of people that you feel need to have it, I think that's 100% completely legitimate. The chance of, I know when I have a traditional like Big Six publisher, and I remember the night before my book came out thinking, how is anyone ever going to find this book? I come to an event like this with all these successful writers, all of them have more books, I've only got one, and I always think, why am I here? How did this happen? And I remember the fear of thinking, Harper's bought this book and it's going to be published and nobody's going to buy it. I'm going to feel so guilty and so bad. I can't imagine how much that would have been doubled if I'd self-published in the night before my book came out and wondering, like, how is anyone ever going to read this? How much money am I going to have to invest, not only in this book's production, but in its marketing, in its publicity? And it's just so overwhelming. And I feel like so often people will get one rejection letter from one agent and then call up Amazon. And you can't do that. You cannot do that. It's like getting turned down for a date and then joining a monastery. You can't do that,
We're getting a theme going here.
Do what?
We're getting a theme.
Yeah, we got a theme going. And I would argue if you want to make a career as a writer, instead of self-publishing, relatively soon, join a writers group of people who are going to be honest with you and borderline mean to you. Don't have your friends read your stuff, or your mom read your stuff, or your husband or wife who's terrified of you read your stuff. Get it out there, join a group, go to the library, hand out cards, get online, get on meetup.com, find a writers group. They'll know somebody who teaches at a university. They'll know somebody who's a writer. They'll know somebody who has an agent. And that's how it happens. It doesn't happen. The reason you know about people who self-publish, who get gigantic book contracts, is because you know about them. Because it happens so rarely. It happens so rarely. So just don't give up. Like, I'm almost like on my knees begging you, don't give up. Don't give up.
Next question.
Cash, how was your experience studying under Ernest Steen?
It was really great. And I've stayed pretty close with him since then. It was his last workshop before he retired, so it was a real honor. You know, I looked up to him when I was in North Carolina. You know, I thought, here's a guy who's writing about the place he's from, and he's making the place he's from worthy of literature. You know, and I wanted to feel that I could do that too, you know. And he had a huge effect on me. But I think more than anything, what I got from him is the idea of writing as work. You know, he said, you know, I took 10 years out of my life, and I worked crappy, miserable jobs so that I could write for 8 hours a day. And he said, after 10 years, I decided if it didn't work, I was just going to do something else. But he said, you have to write. And whenever he gives writing advice, he says, if I gave you 6 words of writing advice, it would be read, 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 write, write, write. If I gave you 8 words, it'd be read, 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 write, 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 write. And it's totally true. So his influence on me was not like a spiritual mentor where you sit at his feet and learn the philosophy of writing. It was very practical. You have to do the work and you have to sit down every day, you know, just like Ron was saying. And Ron's like the most dedicated writer I know. He's probably writing a book right now. I don't see him in the audience. That's probably what he's doing.
He is. He went to the hotel. He had some momentum. So
Yeah,
he was
I'm
writing.
gonna write. It's gonna be out tomorrow.
Next question. Right there.
Yes, Grant,
Yes.
in your work as an advocate for the disabled,
Yes.
how have you translated that into your characters? Because I've seen them in each of your 3 novels.
Well, it's interesting that you've seen it in each of the 3 novels, because I would think that you would just be talking about the first one, where the character with the developmental disability and the. I have mixed feelings about that, because I'm just going to talk about a very simple crime. For right now, for the moment, I had mixed feelings about that, because for those that don't know, for most of my professional life, I worked as an advocate for adults with developmental disabilities, folks on the autism spectrum, and just you know, all manner of things. And toward the end of my career in that, I was doing a lot of work with employment and self-employment, and helping folks start their own careers and things of that nature. So over the course of that time, I saw some of the best things in human beings, and parents of these folks with the developmental disabilities just behave, you know, with such grace and intelligence. And then I end up writing this book about 2 parents that are just monsters, that don't really know what to do with their child, and end up doing the worst possible thing, which is to institutionalize someone with a developmental disability, which used to be common, of course, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even the 80s and the 90s. And I mean, it's still with us today, but we're slowly extricating ourselves from that and realizing, you know, how barbaric, you know, it truly is. So today, we're about community. We're about community inclusion. But as a writer, I'm typically drawn to the dark things in human nature. So I wrote about people that and really the child in that book is more symbolic of when you put these 2 toxic people together, then you have this, as they put it, damaged offspring. So I feel guilty about that, and that I feel like I might have been portraying a stereotype, but certainly not a one that anybody could look at it as positive. And I did put, I hate to use the word disclaimer, but I did, you know, write in the introduction that, you know, this is not the way good people live their lives. And I guess you're right with Ninth Step, or would you be talking about alcoholism? And then at the end of the road, physical disfigurement. Yeah, that's a good observation. And the fact that I spent so many years, as this you're my little psychiatrist now, but this is just kind of coming together for me. That I spent so many years working with people that genuinely are outsiders, and in a sense, you know, wanting to save their lives, to make their lives better. And now this is what I'm talking about, you know, in my writing, that I want to write about outsiders and maybe, make their lives a little better. So I guess in a lot of ways, I really haven't changed careers, I guess. So I hope that answered your question. I rambled a little bit, but thank you for asking that. Did I answer your question? Okay. Thank you for that.
I see several of PCH, Patty Callahan, and
This is a question for Wiley, and maybe too long of a question, but there's a story about how when you got the letter from the first agent and you kind of fell down, and I really love that story of how your wife kind of...
That's my brother, y'all.
Security?
I want everyone to hear.
You're talking about writing and how long did it take. And my wife was always a believer. We were long distance basically the whole time I was writing this book, and then we were married the year it was purchased. And so the book kind of spans our relationship. Like I started writing it like basically the summer I met her. And when I broke up with my first agent, I told her, well, that's it. We had a run, I had an agent, there's no chance of me ever getting one again. And she said, no, you'll get another agent. And I just thought, no, you have no idea what you're talking about. And so she was always kind of the reason that I kept doing it. And so every night I would revise 20 pages and she would read 20 pages. And one night she was reading, I don't know how many of you have read it, but the book opens with this really kind of creepy scene between Adelaide and the preacher in the church. And chronologically, that scene happens 3/4 of the way through the book. But my wife was reading that scene, and she said, why don't you move this to the beginning? That would be a good way to open.
Smart woman.
Those are the 20 pages that sold the book. That's what my agent sent out. That was all he sent out, and that sold the book for us. So she totally sold my novel. And that night, she dreamt that she was lying in the floor of a church, and she was stuck in between two pews, and somebody was laying snakes across her body. And she was kind of tossing and turning in her sleep, and I touched her, and she screamed bloody murder. We were living in faculty housing at this little college, and the walls were paper thin, and I guess my flight or fight kicked in, and I tried to hold her down so she would stop screaming, and my voice dropped like 14 octaves, and I said, no, Mallory, it's me. I'm your husband. And I texted my neighbor. It was like 4 a.m, and I said, I hope that didn't wake you up. Please don't call campus security. Mallory just had a nightmare. And she wrote back and she said, I'm in Texas, it's fine. But another funny story during that time, we were in bed one night. She was reading some of my pages, and I was reading something else, and I would always wait, because she's a great reader, she's really honest. I would always wait to see what she would say or what her comments would be. And she set the pages down, and she said, wow, that's incredible. That's how you write a novel. This is so incredible. And I just thought, yes, it's something's going to happen. And I looked over, and she was reading Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. And she saw the look on my face, and she said, no. Yours is good too. But this won the Pulitzer Prize. This is like really good. So, Jeffrey Eugenides, wherever you are, you and your little pirate hair, I'm coming for you.
I think I saw it, right there.
How much did the book change between the first agent and the second?
Pretty dramatically, actually. I wrote it while I was in graduate school, when I was in workshops that were really character-focused, and so I felt like I had 3 really strong character sketches, 3 really strong voices talking around the perimeters of the story. And my first agent was driving the book toward Adelaide as the female lead. And the plot was kind of going out the window. And that was fine with me, because I'd been in a graduate program where plot was like, you don't talk about that. You don't talk about plot. You talk about what things mean and what characters' motivations are. And the second agent I worked with said, okay, you've got these great characters. You need a book now. You need a story. And so I started learning how to reread books based on how the arc of the story works. And so when I started going back and revising with him, I found the arc of the story, and then I tried to plug in the character's narrative knowledge to match the arc of the story. And so it changed pretty dramatically, for the better. And I really feel like I was getting this tutorial, like it was a workshop that only I was in, you know, about how to write a book. And so this second one's been much easier in terms of that, you know, in terms of the balance of character and plot, that I want to be one of the writers who tries to do both instead of privileging one over the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you transplanted your story back to the South, right? Which one?
Yeah.
So was that hard? Is it harder for you as a Southern person from the South, a Southern writer, to write about things universally and have them understood? I mean, it's interesting to me that you took it back home and then it's been well received. Has that been different?
That's a great question. She asked if it's hard to write about a specific place and have it be universal. I really tried not to, because one of my favorite Southern writers is Faulkner, and he only wrote about Jefferson County, Yarkentaufa County in Mississippi. He said he mined this little postage stamp of earth and tried to make the regional universal. And that's what I was trying to do with Land More Kind Than Home, you know. This just happens to be this kind of church, but this could have been any church. You know, this could have been the Catholic Church, this could have been the Episcopal Diocese, this could have been anything. This could have been the world of politics with crooked politicians. It could have been the world of finance with crooked financiers like Bernie Madoff. You know, it could be about anybody who we build up and put so much trust and faith into, who ultimately pulls back the curtain for what they are. And so I really wanted this to be any family that just happened to be in Madison County, North Carolina. And I wanted this to be a mother who genuinely thought she was doing the best thing for her child. And that's the question I get from book clubs a lot. They're really mad at the mother. And I'll say, how many times have you done something for your child that you ultimately regretted doing? That you look back on and you say, ugh. Whether it's, you know, showing up at their high school with their bag lunch with their name on it and walking into the class and being like, you know, Marcus, where are you? You know, and then you get home and you're like, wow, I should not have done that, you know. And granted, hopefully he wasn't smothered in a healing service during homeroom, but you know, I think we all want the best for our children, and we all do the best we can, and we go with the best information we're given at that time, and that's what this mother does, and it ultimately backfires because of the power of the person she believes in, you know, to fool her, and that could happen anywhere. It does. It happens everywhere.
I think we have time for one more question.
Tell us about your next book.
My next book is, it's set in Gastonia, North Carolina, my hometown, and it's about a washed-up minor league baseball player who kidnaps his two daughters from a foster home and decides to go on the run and try to be a dad to them. And it's set in 1998. So it's got 3 narrators, so it's kind of similar.
Thank you, guys. If you'll just stay seated, we'll have our next panel, but let's give these two a big round of applause.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, guys.